striking and picturesque delineations of the grand, beautiful, wonderful, and interesting scenery around Lough Erne, also published as a description of the beauties of Edinample and Lough Erne Head, is a short book by the Scotsman Angus MacDiarmid, 1770-1820, that led the local history popularizer Archie McCarricher to call him the world's worst author. The book begins with a dedication to the Earl of Breadalbane, presumably John Campbell, the fourth Earl, as the book was first published in 1815. Its groveling and abject tone was unusual by that time. Then an anonymous preface recounts how an unnamed gentleman, on a grouse shooting visit to the Earl's estate in the Lough Erne Head region, met Angus MacDiarmid, a ground officer, or gillie, a gamekeeper and hunting guide, of the Earl's. Struck by MacDiarmid's eloquent descriptions of the scenery and associated legends, the gentleman learned that MacDiarmid had written a manuscript, which MacDiarmid entrusted to him to be published. The preface assures the reader that visitors to Lough Erne Head could confirm MacDiarmid's existence in his sole authorship of the book. It then praises the unparalleled sublimity of the book's style, which it connects with the rugged Highland landscape and offers as the reason that MacDiarmid's sentences overleap the mounds and impediments of grammar. The main text is 28 pages about the region near Lough Erne Head. There are 3 sections. Sketch of the scenery at Lough Erne is described by its title. Features mentioned include Edinample Castle, Glenogle, and Lough Erne. Sketch of the following descriptions covers scenery including the nearby mountains of Benvorlich and Stucacrowan, wild and domestic animals, and local history and legend. Sketch of an ancient history deserves to be inserted as fairly recent local history and animal stories. MacDiarmid's dedication is in grammatical English, but the main text is not, and is full of obscure and misused words. The paragraph about an earthquake in the Grampian Mountains may give an idea. It merits the trouble to exhibit a description of a part of Glenegle's Grampian Mountains, disjointed in the time of the generations past, which event happened about the twilight, that the dread of the horrible sight seized the beholders with fear, alter the comprehension of the individual, discernible to their sight. The pillars of fire rising from the parting of the rock, where there was a cement, the stones forcibly dashing one against another, that the melancholy sight was similar to a corner of mountain set wholly on fire, also overhearing such a loud noise of the stones break at juncture, which vociferous might reach the ears of the people living at great distance. This place perceptible to view of the beholders that passes by. Starting with the book's own preface, it has been classified as a literary curiosity. As the publisher intended, it seems to have succeeded as unintentional humor. 1 JSS, answering a question in Notes and Queries, describes buying a copy of the book from MacDiarmid 2 or 3 years after its publication and having MacDiarmid read it to him and his companions, amusing not only JSS but also MacDiarmid's fellow gillies. A later bookseller called it a most amusing specimen of Gaelic English. In an unusually favorable opinion, RSA, another commentator in Notes and Queries, refers to MacDiarmid's rough eloquence, and despite whatever may be thought of MacDiarmid's style as a writer of English, praises his perception of natural beauty and his generous ardor in narrating feats of heroism. Probably the best known phrase in the book is incoherent transactions, apparently referring to theft, which occurs 3 times. Robert Southey used it twice, with credit to MacDiarmid, in his Life of Cooper to describe William Haley's eccentricities and used it in at least 3 letters. Dr. John Brown cited it as well and took it to apply to Rob Roy, possibly identifying as Rob Roy or Robert MacDiarmid described, a barbarous man, who was notoriously for savageness of manner. The more recent mention of the phrase is in Vladimir Nabokov's novel Pale Fire. The narrator sees MacDiarmid's prose as a precursor to Finnegan's Wake, a comparison Nabokov also made in a draft note. A folklorist quotes MacDiarmid's story of a Kelpie and called the book one of the most astonishing books ever written in English. To account for MacDiarmid's style, JSS said that MacDiarmid's native language was Scottish Gaelic, and in translating his writings into English, he used a dictionary extensively, choosing the most impressive word without regard to its part of speech. McCarricher says that MacDiarmid's minister read in church some Gaelic translations from Samuel Johnson, and MacDiarmid tried to emulate or surpass Johnson's orotund expression. Beyond what has been stated above, little is known about Angus MacDiarmid. RSA says that in 1815 he was introduced to MacDiarmid, a fine athletic young man, enthusiastic but modest. McCarricher suggests a birth year around 1770, which does not agree well with Young in 1815. JSS mentions meeting MacDiarmid a few years later and describes him as dressing more purely than the other gillies, in a black coat and a hat instead of like them in the Highland fashion, presumably the Scottish gilt and associated clothing, An antiquarian notes that although most accept the book as authentic, one may doubt whether McDermott existed. If he did not, JSS and RSA must have joined in the hoax, 50 years later. JSS recalled that the man who first had the manuscript published was a Colonel O'Reilly, and that O'Reilly gave the print run to McDermott to sell for his own benefit. McDermott, Angus, ground officer on the Earl of Breadalbane's estate of Edinapple, 1815. Striking and picturesque delineations of the grand, beautiful, wonderful, and interesting scenery around Loch Earn. Edinburgh, John Moyer. Retrieved September 30, 2008. Bound in Morocco, with the top edge gilt. 1816, 2nd edition, with important additions. Edinburgh, John Moyer. 1841, as a description of the beauties of Edinapple and Loch Earn Head. Caberfeldy, D. Cameron. Bound in half-calf, with the top edge gilt. McDermott, Angus, 1875. Cuntas ar Boyd Hedgat and C. and Lochanagas Edinapolis Eli Hongas Macdi Armad. And Tree Cielo Bwalad Eli Mini at Chadagas Soiler reached. Or a description of the beauties of Edinapple and Loch Earn Head. 3rd edition, with notes and illustrations. Edited by Feargall. Edinburgh. Includes 8 plates. Only the title is in Gaelic. McDermott, Angus, 1876. A description of the beauties of Edinapple and Loch Earn Head. Caberfeldy, D. Cameron. Retrieved on 2008-0930. In 1888, an uncut first edition sold at auction for £5 10 shillings, equivalent to £439 in 2007 currency by the Retail Price Index. English as she is spoke, a 19th century English, Portuguese dictionary whose wild inaccuracy made it another example of unintentional humor. The Eye of Argon, a 1970 fantasy novella of similar reputation,